Okay, I'm just really quick gonna show you how I make a super easy, like overnight sourdough loaf. So my starter, a couple hours ago, I fed it and it's already doubled in size and it's all bubbly and active and ready to go. So most recipes don't call for a ton of starter, actually. It's kind of weird, but I'm just gonna do, this one calls for a 1/4 cup. So I usually do like a heaping amount, and then you can see that it kind of floats on the top. That means that it's active and ready to bake with. And so I already have my water that it called for, and I try to do warm water, so you can see there it's like floating on the top of the water. So you just stir that in. A lot of things, like recipes that I've looked at, call for really fancy tools and equipment. I just have the standard things that anybody would have in their kitchen, like bowls and regular spoons. So nothing fancy, anyone can do it. So I'm just gonna kind of mix that in. If it still has a few clumps, that's okay. They'll work their way out. And then this one calls for 2 teaspoons of salt. It calls for sea salt, but we use pink salt, so it doesn't really matter. Just some kind of salt. And then it calls for 4.5 cups of flour. I didn't want you to have to watch me measure out all my flour, so I already did that in a different bowl. And you just combine. Okay, I went ahead and cut away so you guys didn't have to watch me stir this all together. And it'll be kind of like thick, and they call it a thick and shaggy dough, if that makes sense. And then usually I have to kind of get in there with my hands and finish mixing all of the flour together. And then it'll start to and you kind of just combine it until it becomes like a little dough ball, and then I just leave it in the bowl that I mixed everything in and cover it. This recipe calls for you leave it for like 30 minutes and then you come back and do some stretches and folds. Super simple. I'll show what that process looks like too. And if you have dough on your hands, the best thing to do is, like, if I accidentally spill some flour like I did earlier, take your extra flour and use that to get the dough off your hands in the trash can. Try not to wash any down your sink because it can clog your sinks, I guess. But yeah, it's pretty simple. And then after I do all of those folds, I just leave it overnight, just like this. And then in the morning, I think you do like a couple more stretches and folds. And then you put it in a bowl to rise for like an hour, 30 minutes to an hour. And then you just bake it at 450. And then you have a beautiful loaf of bread. So I will document. Okay, so I'm a little later than 30 minutes, but that's okay. I'm just gonna do a few stretches and folds. I kind of just go clockwise, and you just pull up, back into the middle, up, and then back into the middle. And it should be a little bit more stretchy. It should have kind of come together. You just do a few of those, and then I just flip it back over. You don't want it too tight because you want to give it some room to expand still. And then cover it up for the night. Keep it kind of warm, somewhere between 70 and like 75 degrees. Okay, so overnight my bread rose up, and now it's time to do some stretching and folding. Every recipe is different, but I'm just gonna do those clockwise folds where I just kind of stretch, pull out, and then back to the middle. Kind of make sure it'll get stuck depending on what kind of bowl you use. And then let it rest for about 10 minutes. And then we're gonna add it to our proofing bowl. This was just a cheap one that I ordered off of Amazon. There's lots of different ways you can do this. You can just line a bowl with like a tea towel or a towel, like a kitchen towel of some sort. And then you just wanna let it breathe a little bit, I think, is the key to this. So what I used to do was just line like a strainer that had some holes in it with a tea towel and let it rest in there. And then you cover it. And then I'm gonna let this rest and rise for, I think, about an hour before I put it in the oven. Okay, so I let my bread proof in the basket for about an hour. Then I transferred it to my pot, and I'm getting the oven ready. And I lined the pot with parchment paper, and I use like unbleached parchment paper. And then I use, it's called a lame. It's like a scoring knife. This was just a cheap thing that I ordered off of Amazon, but you can just use a knife. And you just want to kind of like do some different scores or cuts in the bread so it has room to expand. You can do fancy designs like leaves and things like that. I've done that before. But you just want it to be in like a heavy duty pot that will be oven safe. And this was just like a Pampered Chef rock crock, I think is what it's called. Somebody gave it to me because they didn't use it anymore. And then it's got a glass lid so that nothing melts in the oven. So I'm gonna put it in the oven and then I'll show you what it looks like when it's all done. Ta-da!